when Linda Hellier wanted to start the rural library system in the county, she asked down at Deming Grocery who would be a good person to be a librarian, and that man said, well, I know Margaret and Wes already loan out their books. So.
There was a branch that opened in 46 and closed in 63.
Okay, that would be the one across the street from the school. Tubby Ford lived there.
He was the postmaster too.
Yeah.
And they had a little lending library, like right on the side in there where the post office was.
It's
a shelf.
It was pretty innovative, because if we could find a warm, dry place, reasonably warm, reasonably dry, that was willing to house a library, we put a library in there. It might be 200 books and a couple of magazines. It's a library.
The library, originally the Deming Library, was in the back of the church, the Presbyterian church, but the church caught on fire, and as Margaret Orr told the story, the big boys threw the books out the window to save them.
I went to school in the community center when it was a school. It was built in the late 1930s. At that time, the library was in a room across the hallway from our classroom. The librarian was a lady who wore 3 hats. Agda Zemke, she was often known as Tula. She was the school janitor, the bus driver who picked us up every morning, and the librarian.
We were just talking about Dorothy Notaboom. She worked here also, and Dorothy's job was to do overdue books. At that time, there was no fine if you had an overdue book, but Dorothy was on top of her job. I would hate to see her when I was in the grocery store, because I knew she was going to say, Gretchen, you have some overdue books here, you need to bring them in.
So I grew up in Whatcom County, a half a mile away from what was the Pleasant Valley Library. It was located in an old abandoned schoolhouse, and across the street on the other corner was an old abandoned church. And as kids, we used to play in those buildings, but then the library was in a part where you went up a few stairs, and what that part of the building wasn't condemned. I don't remember the year that they condemned the whole building, but I remember it happening, and then the bookmobile started coming.
When the library was first beginning here, it was a bookmobile.
In those days, the bookmobile came about every 2 weeks.
The bookmobile was considered to be an essential service.
Wow.
Well, this was Linda Hellier's idea. The bookmobile had to go out. If the milk trucks could go out, and we could follow the milk trucks.
The earliest memory of Lummi Island Library for me was the bookmobile in '75, and it made 2 stops. I think every other week.
Anything exciting? Any scary stories?
Well, there was that time I backed into a stump. You ran over the stump. I know. She was with me.
It was called Explore Other Worlds. And so we were doing our gig, and you stepped behind the book, which was this book. And what happened is it set off the fire alarms
in the whole building.
In the entire.
And they had to evacuate the school. Yes. So our summer reading club presentation had a real impact. I don't think they ever forgot.
The books were passed around inside the jail. We usually figured 1 copy in a tank where there's like 30 guys. That book, if it was good, would be passed around. You know, they were hungry for books.
Debbie, the main librarian here, thought it would be a good idea if he came to the library with the little ones. And it just seemed a great fit because he loves to watch little people. And the little ones, at first were a little wary of him, like they usually are. But they've gotten now so that they just love seeing Paul. And so he's been coming for 16 years.
I love the library. I could live here, easily.
I recognize that the library certainly needed to be redone. It was a small library and very limited in what they could offer.
It wasn't somehow that I was sitting at home thinking what we really need is a new library.
there was a library, and I was grateful for it. And I used to talk about it. I would refer to it as the cutest Dickensian library still extant in the 20th century, but it seemed to do what needed to be done.
When the old pink barn was declared surplus by the city of Blaine, it became this wonderful library here, and librarian Kathy Richardson asked for help to move the books.
I know that none of us had money, but we all had a dream.
Some people didn't think we needed a new library in Ferndale, you know. They thought we needed a new police station, but not a new library.
This is the best thing that ever happened on Point Roberts, this building.
Without the Friends group that we have, this building would not exist.
And I can't think of anything better to have done than to be part of this structure that allows people to learn and grow.
The library saved my life, really, in some ways.
To top it off, this is a great library. I'm sure you've figured that out already.
Go libraries.